Hi, I hope everyone had a good Easter break and that the exam didn't distract too much from your Easter celebrations. I wanted to send a video providing some commentary on the last exam and then talk a little bit about the discussion board posts and the rest of the semester. I finished grading the exams last night, and so log into your Blackboard account and look in the final column for exam 2, and you should see your score. The score was out of 30 points. No one got a perfect, so it was a little disappointing, but the grades were overall very good. Certainly, if you have any questions or concern about your score, feel free to reach out to me and ask me any questions. The last 5 questions in the exam were short answer questions about the case study that I had sent. And I just want to provide a little bit of feedback about some of the answers that people gave. The first question was I asked about the negative externality costs for cigarettes, and I asked you to describe some of those externalities. A few of you listed externalities that weren't actually externalities. So, for example, someone mentioned that the hospital revenues would decline as a result of healthier consumers. And while that's certainly true, that would not be an example of an externality. An externality is a external cost that is borne by a third party, not involved in the transaction. And in this case, the decline in hospital revenue is actually savings or money that could be spent by consumers. So that's just a transfer from one party to another. It's not actually imposing a cost on a third party. The other example that people sometimes put was the decline in tax revenue from the excise tax because of black market activities or cross-border shopping. Again, that's not actually a cost being borne by a third party. And you're right that there might be a decline in tax revenue as a result of these consumer behavioral changes. But it's the government itself that's bearing the cost in that example, and they're a party in the transaction, and so that would not count as a negative externality. The other questions asked about if the tax proposal was passed, how would that change the demand for alcohol? In particular, I was asking whether or not you think that cigarettes and alcohol are substitutes or complements. I was looking for one of those 2 answers. I accepted either one as long as you understood what the definition of those types of goods was. And I said if you answered that alcohol and cigarettes were complements, then the effect on tax revenue would unambiguously go down. That is, if the demand for cigarettes goes down as a result of the excise tax, then the demand for alcohol is also going to go down if they're complementary goods. And if they both go down, then we know that the tax revenue is going to decrease. And a couple of you mentioned that they were complementary goods and used a pretty clever example. In bars in Kentucky, for example, you might see cigarette ashtrays and alcohol at the bar because a lot of people like to smoke and drink at the same time. And so in that case, they might be complementary goods. You could say they were substitutes. That was also a fine answer. But in this case, the effect on the tax revenue collections was ambiguous. It could be the case that tax revenues could go up depending on the price of or the amount of the excise tax and the amount of quantity of alcohol consumed. So tax revenue is a function of both the price and the quantity. And so without further information, it was actually difficult to answer that question on the effect of tax revenue if alcohol and cigarettes were substitutes. You could say it could go up, you could say it could go down, but I was really looking for the reasons why you thought that answer might be ambiguous. And then the last question I asked you, just your personal opinion on whether or not you would vote for the tax and the bill as a whole. Again, I didn't take off points if you said one answer or another, as long as you defended it. There's not a right or wrong answer, of course, in this case. It's your particular political opinion. Most of you voted in favor or would vote in favor of this. I don't think anybody said that they were a smoker. And so a lot of you said that, you'll get lower income taxes, and so you benefit in that regard, and then you're not actually paying the costs of the higher cigarette taxes. So for you, this is sort of a win-win, which in and of itself is an interesting phenomenon in that if you want to understand elections and you want to understand how people vote and what the outcome might be, it's a pretty good rule of thumb to think that people vote in their own self-interest. And this is often why, for example, school levies in elderly neighborhoods might fail because they often don't see the benefits, but then they pay the costs. But some of you actually said no, and you said that the people who are paying the cost should be the ones who are receiving the benefit. And this is really illustrating the benefits principle of taxation. And so in this case, Governor Kasich was taking the increased revenue from cigarette taxes and was not using it to actually offset the externalities. Rather, he was using it to lower income taxes. And that certainly is one particular political philosophy, but some people objected to that approach. So let me talk a little bit about the discussion board posts from last week. Generally, they were, again, very, very good, talking about the effect of Rumpke's landfill on the area and negative externalities. A couple things to keep in mind. Some of you said that one response might be for the government to levy fines as a way to combat the problem that Rumpke was facing and their inadequacy in dealing with the problem, or perceived inadequacy of dealing with the problem. And that's certainly one option. But again, with the levying of fines, what we're interested in is who is ultimately bearing the burden of that fine. And is Rumpke actually passing that fine on to consumers in the form of higher prices? Are they maybe reducing the wages or the benefits of their workers? Or are the executives the one who are actually paying the fine in terms of lower profits? It's a combination of all three. And it's probably more likely that it's the increase in prices and the lowering the wages rather than the executives themselves that are paying the majority of the fines. So something to keep in mind when you're levying fines. Andrew Priesting, I thought, made a really good post about NIMBYism. So NIMBYism is also called not in my backyard. And landfills is a great example of a negative externality that's imposed, and people need landfills, obviously, but nobody wants it in their backyard, and so that can create all kinds of political debate, and economic debate about what to do there. And I thought Andrew posted a great link that Rumpke had written that talked about the economic benefits of Rumpke on the region. So take a look at that post. There are plenty of other great posts from last week, so feel free, if you're interested in those kind of topics, to peruse and comment with your classmates. So we've gone through about half of the course now. 100 points have been graded. So if you look in the running total column in Blackboard, you'll see your final score out of 100. And so that gives you a very good sense about where you stand today. And there will be a total of 200 points. We have 3 more weeks of classes left. There'll be an exam, just like there was last week at the end of week 7. That'll cover all the material in weeks 5, 6, or 7. So please take a look at the discussion board post, the homework assignment this week. We're continuing to move along. I know this class moves at a pretty fast pace, but again, if you have any questions or concerns, always feel free to reach out to me. But most people are doing pretty well with the class, and I'm looking forward to reading your discussion board posts in the future. Take care.